button. So George and Jim, thank you very much again for being here. I do appreciate it. If nobody knows anything else about George, George is Joe Malarkey. If you haven't gone and YouTubed or looked him up and watched some of the amazing videos, George has put on a character called Joe Malarkey, the world's worst motivational speaker, and it's fabulous. It's just such a great, ironic conversationalist. You know, you do a great job of pointing out the highlights of what people do right and wrong. So that's fabulous. 20-year professional speaker, and you're a professional 80%er.
I am that. That's just why I hooked up with Jim, who I'll be curious before we get too deep. Can you give us a sense, Curry, of how many people saw us present in Atlanta?
Absolutely.
Or on streaming?
Absolutely. If you guys go into the chat, use the there is the yes, no options or the raise hand option. If you watched or if you were at the event in Atlanta or Miami, give us a hands up and we'll see how many people.
Yeah, I just don't want to belabor stuff that most everybody is familiar with as we go through this.
The hands are being raised as we're saying. So there's going to be, I believe there's going to be some people who did see it, and but I want to I just want to make sure we definitely talk about why I actually set this up. So
okay, absolutely.
But you absolutely created this concept based on your own personal experience with creating that chain.
Right. It kind of goes back to the original creator kind of that started this whole thing, and we just kind of connected some dots, Jim and I. And let me just say this, we're going to toss around the terms 80%er and 20%er, and I am an 80%er, and we'll define that. Jim is a 20%er to the max. Jim, everything from his paper route, which he was #1 in the company, to taking $500 and parlaying that into a $15 million company, to being named Distributor of the Year of two network marketing companies. So while I'm on one end of the spectrum of the 80%, Jim was on the other. So where this came from was a thing that I started researching, which was the Pareto principle. And most of you are going to be familiar with this, and this is the classic 80-20 rule. And it basically says that 80% of your results are going to come from 20% of your activities. That's kind of the framework of it. And the way it works in the real world, and it's astonishing how pervasive this is in a sales-oriented company, 80% of the sales are going to come from 20% of the salespeople. In a church, 80% of the contributions are going to come from 20% of the parishioners. In a company that 80% of their customers are just going to contribute 20% of their income, whereas 20% of their customers are going to contribute 80%. And so the thing that fascinated me about this was I realized, looking at this 80-20 thing, especially in the history, I had a history with network marketing, and I was never successful. And I realized I was in the 80%. I was in the group that did not perform nearly as much as the others. And so the thing that caught my attention was most of the studying done, most of the research done on this 80-20 thing was from the top view down. It was companies wanting to know how to get those 20% performers, how to get those 20% customers that generate all the income. And the thing that hit me was, I think I'm in the 80%. Why? What's the difference between me and Jim, who is a 20% performer that generates 80% income?
Hey, George, can I interrupt you for just a second?
Absolutely.
I was going to go back to Jim for just a second before we jump into all of the details. Jim, you have he already gave you this great bio, man. You've done some amazing stuff. You've created incredible businesses. Man, you've been on QVC 25 times. I don't know if they just keep inviting you back because they don't have any other guests. Is there anybody else who is inventing anything on the show? What is it that you were showing on QVC, Jim?
Well, my partner and I invented a product. It was just a little computer peripheral that sat in your desk that held a cord of a mouse, so that when you went to use the mouse, the cord didn't get hung up in your desk. And I appeared about 25, 30 times. We sold millions of them on QVC. And it was, of course, they went wireless, so there went that whole business. But it was fun. I'd travel from Phoenix to Westchester, Pennsylvania, go on TV for 8 minutes, turn around and come back, and it was worth every minute. So,
wow, that's awesome. And then on top of all that, you joined network marketing companies. What attracted you to network marketing?
Well, I own my own traditional business, which you kind of alluded to, and I had two of them. One I built to about 15 million, and one I built to about 4.5 million. And I sold them and retired, and in my 40s. And I got out here in Phoenix, and I go, okay, I don't play golf well enough that I even want to play every day. What do I do next? But I loved building a business, but I didn't want all the headaches associated with building a business either. And network marketing it offered absolutely everything that I ever wanted in a business. All I had to do was market it. They took care of all the paperwork. So it worked out well. It was a nice fit for me.
That is awesome. And that's really exactly, I think, what a lot of people, you don't want the headache of the brick and mortar and rent and electric bills and stock and everything else, and you allow somebody else to do it.
Actually, we had a pretty large team, and one of my sons, who, by the way, was the first person I ever enrolled in network marketing, he went on to become Distributor of the Year as well. So that was kind of a nice thing. But my son had actually hired George for an event, and I drove down just to hear it. I sat in the back with my wife and my dog, and when George got done, I go, and I don't laugh at many comedians, but I think he's one of the most talented people I've ever met in my entire life. And I remember going up to him afterwards and saying, George, if you ever need a straight man on stage, let me know. And here, 10 years later, he calls me and he says, I need somebody. And I go, George, I'm retired, and I didn't know that George was even at the time, I didn't know he was in the Speakers Hall of Fame. I didn't know he appeared on 60 Minutes or To Tell the Truth. All I knew is that he sucked at network marketing, and I never could figure it out why he was so bad. He had all that stage presence and all the database, and here it is 10 years later, and he said, well, let me tell you why I was bad at it. Maybe we can correct it. So that's how we got together.
Yeah.
Well, it is incredible that two people, can connect from, around the country, around the world, and, create a friendship, create that, that relationship that turns into a business partnership. And I think that network marketing has a very, very strange way of making that happen with a lot of people who've never met before, and then take that to a whole nother level in terms of business and friendship. So, but to jump into the reason why we're having this is because of the consistency chain. George's book, actually, I've seen George talk and tell a lot of this story twice now, and I couldn't get enough, so I read the book. And when I got back from my cruise, I read this while I was on a cruise, so thanks for distracting me from the beautiful water and all the fun stuff that was going on. But when I read this, I will tell you that I came back excited to work with my team and the 80%ers who I wanted to help them do one thing, just one daily consistent action. And then I screwed that up already, but I've got to work on it myself. But I'm going to let one of you jump in here and talk about, George, get back into the Pareto principle and how, you discovered this pathway.
Well, the the thing was, you could look at Jim or I, and we seem to have a lot of commonalities. I mean, we're, you know, you look at the 80-20, and each group has intelligent, smart, educated, talented, knowledgeable people. And for some reason, one group does really, really well, and the other group struggles. The 80% struggles. And when you eliminate all the commonalities, what it came down to for me was simply this, and experience bore this out. The 20% high performers do simply what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, on an unbelievably consistent basis. And the 80% like me, we know what needs to be done. We just, for whatever reason, the reason that I didn't understand, we don't do it consistently. And the deeper we dug, that's when I talk about us kind of connecting some dots, we connected a dot to the famous marshmallow study, which I don't really want to go into deeply here, but what it does is it gives us the understanding of why we're different. And we are literally, our brains are wired differently. And this shows up in testing of kids younger than 5 years old, and it holds up throughout their entire lives. That people like me are challenged to delay gratification, to set goals and achieve them, to stay in consistent action on anything. And that was the challenge. And that was what I didn't overcome. It's what Jim is a master of. I mean, Jim, talk about for a second just about the way you built your business. You didn't, I mean, it wasn't massive action.
No, it wasn't massive action whatsoever. In fact, probably, I think it's better to do something on a consistent basis, on a daily basis, rather than do something, something real strong, real hard 1 or 2 days and then take 3 or 4 off. So, and even with the network marketing business, Corey, you know that if you look at the 80-20, I mean, just look at, 20% of the people that give you 80% of the production, and you can even take that down further. 20% of the 20% is around 4 people. And that coincides exactly. I know a lot of people on this call are proponents of Dale Calvert, and which I love his material. Absolutely love the guy. And he'll tell you that it's the top 3%, 4%, right? And those top 3 or 4%, they don't need, they don't need any hand holding. But that other group, he calls it 27%, we call it 17%. That's the group that we feel we can really help by starting a consistency chain and have them doing something on a daily basis. When I ran my copier business, I had a photocopier company for years and sold out to a company called Icon. And I required my salespeople and myself just to show the machine once a day. And that consistent activity led to us being pretty significant, pretty large size company. So, is that what you were referring to, George?
Yeah. And let me just say this too. Having spoken to a few groups now, what we've seen is that we have after the event's over, we have a lot of the people who would self-identify as the 80% come up to us, and it's very, very, it's all hugs and kisses because we have validated their experience.
Whoa, I didn't get a hug or a kiss.
Well, you're in the wrong line.
Oh, okay.
It's the leadership has a little bit of a challenge with this because it calls into question a lot of things that have been the way business has been done. And the reality is the leaders they're going to lead. People like Curry, it wouldn't matter what we say or did. He's going to continue to knock it out of the park. It's people like me that would struggle. And the thing that made it tough for the leaders is to kind of take in the fact that what worked for them, what works so good for Curry, I can't get it to work for me. And so there's a disconnect there.
And that's very frustrating to somebody like Curry or myself or any other, most of the people on this call are 20%ers, they're leaders. It's frustrating to bring somebody on board and not have them be successful when you've done everything you could. You've shown them everything that you've done, and it's just not working. So it's very frustrating. So it's, and when George and I initially sat down, he said, well, Jim, I'm not wired the same way. I mean, that was a new concept. I just thought he didn't have a big enough why, or he was lazy, or he wasn't disciplined enough, or he was, well, there's probably a lot of truth in all that, actually, George. But I started to realize how many people that I brought on, and I personally brought on over 550 people in my last company. And I look back now and look at how many people I could have helped if I was just a little bit smarter, and looked at it differently.
But it's not a matter of being smarter. It's just a matter of being exposed to some new material. Because when we talk about the 80% are wired differently, that's not a metaphor. I mean, it's literally, physically, our brains are wired differently. The good news is we can rewire our brains. I was just watching a TED Talk from a neurological scientist, and she was talking about this unbelievable ability through neuroplasticity that we can literally rewire our brains. We can change the way we think, and we can move ourselves from that 80% into the 80% inconsistency into that 20% consistency, which is the most exciting thing I'd ever heard.
I was just watching Judge Judy.
To the point where when I tested this out, I started working out, and I got the killer flu this last month that finally stopped my streak at above 500 workout days in a row.
Oh.
And so I'd never been consistent, and through this technique that we used, I became consistent. And the other, then the bad news is, wow, the streak broke, but that's not really bad because I had 5 days off, and guess what I did? I started again, and I still have the same momentum I had before. So it's that part of it is really exciting. So let me just say this for the leaders. It's possible that the leaders don't need what we're talking about, other than the fact you desperately need to understand this so you can help people in your group and you can help people in your family. I mean, people that you know and love. Not everybody in your family is going to be a 20%er. And you see a lot of people, family dynamics, people that are butting heads because why is this so easy for me and so hard for you? Jim, tell them that story about your daughter-in-law.
My son Adam married a beautiful girl named Sarah, and they have 3 kids. And anyway, Sarah has been wanting to write a book for a long time. And she was over here a little over 2 months ago. She was here, and we were talking, and she was fascinated by my consistency chain chart that I had going. She says, "Oh, I need to start one. I want to write a book." And I said, "Well," and she was about ready to hire a coach, actually, which was around $12,000 a year. And I looked at her and I said, "Sarah, I'll coach you for free." And my son looked at me like, "Thanks, Dad," and I said, if you want to start writing, I'll help you do it. And she said, "Love to." They were dropping off Hudson, who was our little grandson, who was 2.5, and they were going out on a date night. And she said, "I'll start it tomorrow." And I mean, I love her, and I said, "Absolutely, you can start it tomorrow if you want." And I came back in the office, and I was puttering, whatever. And I went back out. She was still there. And I go, "Sarah," I go, "if you want to start tomorrow, I don't think I can coach you." I said, "You need to," and she said, "What?" And I said, "You need to start tonight." And she said, "Well, we're going out to dinner." And she said, "I don't have a journal or anything." And I said, "Sarah, just go to the computer and download a calendar. All right. And start writing." She says, "Well, I don't have time." I said, "Sarah, can you write 1 sentence?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I can write 1 sentence." I said, "So do it. You need to start today. And in fact, she was here, George, yesterday, and she's now got over 60 days consecutively. She has, she's written a half dozen chapters in her book, and it's so gratifying. And so you can do things other than, obviously work related, but all of us that are even 20%ers, there's certain areas that we're better at than another. And
right.
I mean, whether to be asking for referrals or social, being on social media or follow up or whatever, pick one area that you want to improve in and use that as your consistency chain.
So, and it's just, it's a perfect example of, in Jim's case, being able to help somebody. I mean, Jim's a 20%er, but he was able to help somebody that just struggled. in this one area that she really wanted. It wasn't a matter of she didn't have a big enough why or that she wanted to or she was passionate about. She just couldn't get started. She couldn't see the path to start. And
now
this
she feels better about herself every day, George.
Yeah, I mean, she wrote us an amazing testimonial that it's changed the way she looks at herself. She feels differently about herself because she's doing what she was intended to do.
Can I ask a question in the middle of all this? So, you know, I live with that why, right? Like the big enough why. And when Jim said that, I was about to butt in right before he used that word. And you know, in all of the network marketing training, all of the events that we've been to, I mean, it's preached. You know, if your why doesn't make you cry, and if you don't have the big enough why, and all but hearing George talk about, you know, it has nothing to do really with your why because your thought processes are different regardless. You know, each one of us have, I mean, we're all from different parts of walks of life, right? We're not built the same. But from a 20%, and I was telling Jim this, I believe, no, it was not, it was the other speaker. My brain just shut down. I don't believe that I was originally a 20%er.
Right.
Like I got started and it took me a very, very long time to get going. And then once I got into it and figured it out, it just kind of flipped. And so my question, since we do have a lot of business builders in this room, people who are at least attempting, and they're showing up because they're excited. What, if you could give a tip either from both George and Jim, one tip of a consistent action for business building? I mean, if you have an opinion or have you know, from both of you, could I get an idea of what both of you would do as a consistent action daily for business building?
I'm going to let Jim go with this.
Okay. Yeah, you know, it's sometimes when you've built a large business, you get very complacent too, Curry, and you go away from the things that made you successful. So I have a consistency chain as it deals with prospecting. And as far as one of my chains is that I have to have one meaningful conversation every day with somebody about a product, right? And it can be the Acervia product, or it could be the consistency. By the way, I love this product. I think it's really going to help George and I, you know, promote our website. So I love the product. So I started a consistency chain where I just want to have one meaningful conversation every single day. And then you realize that some days you don't have a meaningful conversation, especially if you're part-time or got other things going on, or you know, something happens, life gets in the way. So then I adjusted mine a little bit. And mine is simply, I have to reach out to 10 people a day or talk to one, whichever comes first. And I can reach out very easily because I could reach out with an email, a phone call, go to a networking event, Facebook messaging, whatever. I can get 10 done pretty quickly. So that's how I do it from a business standpoint. And I found by doing that, my pipeline is so full that I can't get through all the calls every day. So that's how I use it from a business standpoint, from a prospecting one anyway.
Right.
I know, George, probably that wouldn't be for you, but.
No, I mean, I've got a chain related to our speaking business that I have. In the book, I talk about Pomodoros, which is just a specified amount of time that you're going to spend on a task. And it's really a good tool to use when a task is too big to get done in a day or a week or whatever. And the tendency is you look at it and I can't get started. It's just too big. And for instance, one a real practical Pomodoro that I did the other day was my taxes. It's just something I hate. And I just said, just 25 minutes. Just 25 minutes. Just do 25 minutes, dude. By the time you're 25 minutes, you do this day after day, you're going to be done. It's going to be April 15th. Everything's going to be done. And the reality is that it's much like Jim's daughter-in-law, who will sit down and write for 5 minutes and looks up and it's an hour and a half. The same thing. You get the hardest part is to start. And you start, and I didn't spend 25 minutes on taxes. I spent about 10 hours because I just wanted, once I was in the flow of it, I wanted to get it done. So, but this brings up a really interesting point we talk about in the Give Me 3 Days. There's kind of a 3-part process in that: define or decide on the area of our lives that we want to really focus on, and then define that activity. And we've seen, Jim and I had a chance to go back to a group that we spoke to earlier this year, and we noticed 2 things that people were having a challenge with. And one of them was people would decide, I want to focus on my business, and then they would define an activity, and the activities fall in these 80-20 categories too. There are some activities that are 20%, you spend 20% of your time on, they bring back 80% of the results. And so you want to be really, really careful and go talk to people in your business that have been successful and really nail those activities that are the key activities. Now, I've got to believe in a network marketing situation, prospecting and inviting are going to be, I mean, that's kind of the lifeblood. So what Jim was talking about, that's going to be an activity that's going to generate, and you were talking about it fills your pipeline and generates outsized results. So whatever it is that you pick something that it's going to matter. If you're able to keep this chain going and do this, pick something that's really going to have impact.
Yeah,
so that you see results.
It's easy. I mean, I remember sitting down and saying, I'm going to spend 45 minutes a day on personal growth, just reading something that dealing with personal growth. And the first day I did my 45 minutes. The second day, I mean, I had an early morning appointment. I had to, other things came up and I couldn't do it. And I came back home and I didn't get to write victory on my calendar. I mean, it was a 0 on the calendar, and I felt terrible. And then the next day it looked even worse. So I readjusted. It doesn't make any difference what you have to have the art of showing up before you do the task. And I rewrote it and I said, I need to spend 5 minutes a day on personal growth. Well, 5 minutes I could do easily. And as a result of sitting down and just starting the 5 minutes, I got the 45 minutes done. And so it's not about the performance, it's about the practice. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind. Just start it. You can change it later. I mean, you can intensify it, later on, whatever that activity is.
Right. Don't be afraid to start small, because we're literally, the most important thing in the beginning for people like me is I'm literally rewiring my brain to be consistent. And that's my goal, because once I develop this consistency skill, I can apply it to anything, and I can scale it up or scale it down as need be. But so don't be afraid. We were talking to a gentleman earlier today, and Jim was talking about reaching out to 10 people a day. And for me, my 80%, that would have scared me to death. I'm like, there's no way I can reach out. And then he explained how he did it. I was like, okay. But if you told me I had to make 10 phone calls, outbound cold calls every day, I'm out. I'm going to have to find something else that I'm going to do, because that ain't going to work for me. I'm not going to do it. If you told me I had to do 1, there's going to be bourbon involved, but I can probably do that. but 10, there's no way. So, scale it down to something that you feel that stretches you a little bit, stretches you just a little bit, but you still feel confident. Well, yeah, I can totally do that. So that's one of the things that we saw in this group that we talked to. There were some people that picked activities that, okay, yeah, that's good, but man, it's not the best thing you could have been doing. Pick something that's really going to have an impact. And then the second thing that we saw, and we've noticed this with some folks that we've talked to from the survey event, the group that we spoke to, a big real estate company, and the people who had the biggest struggle with this, the 80% people like me who had the biggest struggle with this consistency chain, and it all came down to one thing, and that is they didn't start. They didn't start. I mean, it's a classic putting off till tomorrow. Matter of fact, we're in development of an app right now And when you're going to download the app, and if you don't start in the first 24 hours, it's going to go away, because that's how important it is. I mean, going back to the story of Jim and his daughter-in-law, that was the key.
Yeah.
Making her start now, start tonight. If there's anybody on this call that has been exposed to this material, and you know what, until I read the book, I just don't feel like I want to, until something, no, there's no until something. It's tonight. Now, as soon as this thing ends, figure out what you want to do that's going to make an impact and start.
And if it's prospecting, and if you have to start with reaching out to one person, make it one, and you can create, you can change it, as you go along. Once you get a few days, and I'll grab this. I don't know if you can see it, Curry, but this is my calendar. And every day I put either victory in. George puts an X, I put in victory. I just think it sounds better, all right? And every day I look at this, just like George can look at his wall behind him, you feel good about yourself because you've got all these small little victories. And they just add up to a point where you say, yeah, I am, this is worth the effort. I'm capable of doing this.
You start seeing results, you start seeing momentum.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim is a classic 20%er who had literally just kind of one area of his life that he had a challenge getting a hold of. And what's your experience?
Well, Curry, I can look back I have my original set of goals back from 1972 on my wall, okay? So I've been writing out goals for a long, long time. The only Christmas gift I ever asked of my kids was their goals in writing. And so I've been very goal-oriented. And if you look back at my goals, you can see where I've had weight loss on my goal sheets for years. I mean, for years and years and years. And it's just reached the point that I failed so many times that I've just given up. And when George said, well, what's one area that you could really focus on that would be important to you? Mine was weight. So I started a consistency chain on Friday the 13th, in October. And it's been I can look at my phone. I think it's been 164 days. And I have actually walked 3 miles a day for 157 days. Now, I missed 7 days. I have great excuses for those 7 days. Once was on Super Bowl Sunday, I was in mourning that my Patriots lost, and I didn't feel like doing anything. But
in fairness, they took the day off too, so don't feel bad about that.
I'm a little deflated. Don't go there, okay? But excuse me. As a result, I have now walked, almost 160 days, doing 3 miles, a minimum of 3 miles every day. And I go, gosh, I feel good about it. I feel good about myself. And I was so tempted as a 20%er to start adding 4 or 5 other little chains going along with it. But I've reached the point now where I said, okay, I've done it enough so I come back some days. I don't even mark it off my calendar because I don't even think about it. So now I've started eating healthier. I started that chain about 2 weeks ago where I have to eat better. And but it's amazing. Nothing else has worked, so I figured, well, why not try this? It worked for George, and maybe it worked for me.
And the last time you went into your doctor, they noticed a difference.
Oh, my blood pressure has been 170 over 95 or 100, and I went back about a week ago because I've got bronchitis, so I apologize for coughing. But I went back, and it was 133 over 70, and he said, hey, you've lost some weight. And he says, your blood pressure is good. And I'm going, really? This is happening? This is working? I mean, my goodness. Thank you, George.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was not, that certainly was part of the goal, to be healthier, to see the blood pressure come down, the weight come down. But he got there just by focusing on one simple action a day. That was the thing. It was something he could do. And I've been in Jim's office, obviously, and to see the goals literally going back for 40, 50 years. And this is a goal that's been up there. And it took this slight change in thinking to actually make progress in that goal that's been a challenge for 40 or 50 years. I mean, that's amazing.
Now, George, just to jump in, I think in my own personal experience over the years, and I'm not going to take up too much more of your all's time, but my personal experience over the years, I actually feel like I'm the kind of guy who actually never had any goals. Like I was, small town, no opportunities in life, couldn't afford college, had no dreams of being anything other than just a survivor. You know what I'm saying? And so getting to a point where I discovered network marketing was the point that I discovered goal setting and discovered having a bigger vision for my future. And so it's we all, like you said earlier, we all come from different places, and having to figure out that wiring and it's that happy balance. So I will tell you, Jim sent me a lovely card for announcing that I was going to that I started my own personal chain, and promptly broke it. So I have to I decided I personally would walk my dog 2 miles a day, and I did one day, and the very next day something came up and ruined the entire day. So I was angry about it, so I got to get back into it already again.
Well, just say you're going to walk your dog, just put the collar on and take him out the end of the dooryard if that's what you have to do to start it. By the way, Curry, you'd love this one. The reason I got into business and started 2 businesses that I sold was because when I got out of college, I was working at a retail store in Hartford, Connecticut, and I received a letter in the mail saying that my name had come to their attention as somebody that had leadership qualities and blah, blah, blah. And I went to a meeting at Holiday Inn. I joined a network marketing company. Now, this is back in 1972. I paid $3,200 to join, all right? And the company got shut down within a year. But it gave me the personal growth because I was never exposed to books. I mean, a positive thinking book, never exposed to it. And it exposed me to positive thinking books. I did pretty well in the company for a short period of time, but it gave me the skills to start my own business. And so, and I later found out that this particular person sent out 1,000 letters. I was the only one to respond.
I will tell you, and I did a Facebook Live earlier about that specific thing, about how I truly believe that network marketing in general is more about personal development than anything else. And I want to do this real fast while you guys are still on here. Just to clarify with what he just said, this is just the last year of my life. So I can say that I've dove into personal development to become the person, the leader, but you got this is awesome. George, your vision for what you've created here with Jim is truly fascinating for those of us who want to try to help everybody. I will tell you the reason why I said I totally messed it up. I got off the boat, I got excited, I read this book, I read Kevin Marino's Shut Up and Text book back to back, and I believe those 2 books combined are gold. Like, as if you can take this consistent pattern of texting and shutting up at the same time over and over and over again, you're going to win. I think that's a consistent action. So I come back with this idea to help everybody to do this and to start this consistent action. And then the very next thing out of my mouth is, okay, we're going to do a blitz. Like the very next thing. So my buddy called me and said, listen, you just told everybody who's going to do one thing, and then you tell them that we're going to do 11 presentations a day for 30 days. Which one is it? And I said, well, you have to go after everybody, right? You have to help the ones at one level, and then you have to help the 20%ers who want to win. So it's like you have to have that fine balance of working with everybody.
I did a 30-day blitz once for one day.
I will tell you, and we told George this, we actually started this business, Aservia, with 27 days in a row of 5 presentations a day. And now we have over 100 people lined up to do over 11 presentations a day for 30 days. So this is, yeah, it's a nightmare situation, but we get to help a lot of people. And so, but anyways, getting,
here's
go
the
ahead.
one is, oh, go ahead,
George. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, if my 80% personality, which has a tough time looking at that degree of activity for that length of time, I'm gonna self-select out. I'm not gonna be. I look at that, and my fear is, if that's what I have to do to be successful, this is going to be a tough business for me. And so, I think the key is just the repetition of message that, I'm consistent. Sometimes I do a great deal of activity. Sometimes I do a lesser amount, but I'm always moving forward. And so that there's a door open for me that says, listen, you might be terrified or just feel completely incapable of joining us in this blitz, but participate at the level that you can, and it's still going to work. You just have to show up in the way that you can show up. I was telling Jim, I was thinking of a cartoon of a 10-story building, and the leader's up there at the 10-story building, and there's a whole line of people at the ground floor, and he's got the door open, say, why don't they come in? And the reason why is because we don't see a way in. We're not at that level. We can't see it. So our whole goal is to help that 80% that find a way in, just a ground floor entrance into this. And over time, we'll help you. We can help you up to the 10th floor, but let's meet you where you are right now.
And the one thing I'd add, Curry, and by the way, you make me tired just watching you. And you're on. All the things you do to support your team, kudos. You're the top 3%. There's no question about it. I'd as we have said before, I'd love to have you on my team. And but it's if anybody needs any advice or help from my perspective, I charge very little, none. It's no charge. If I can help anybody, just email me, private message me, whatever. I spend a little bit of time. I see one guy on the phone over in New Zealand. We spoke for quite a bit yesterday. So if I can help anybody whatsoever, please don't hesitate, because we want to show that our concept will help the 80%, and in some cases we can bring it up to 97% of the people, because it's so needed as a leader. We want to help everybody, as you know. Some people you just have to, reach out differently to. And this is an alternative.
And be careful contacting Jim. You will get brownies. Be careful. Those brownies are delicious.
He's never sent me brownies. That's
weird. Oh my, yeah, what? Now I'm in trouble. And by the way, just to clarify for those who I do scare away by our massive action, the blitz isn't just me. So now it's been divided into people, and it's actually designed, because it's online, where the daily consistent action of inviting, you just pick a time of the day and invite for one of the presentations. So there's always going to be team support to help you build your business. And that's what we wanted to do, was a consistent, even more consistent than what we'd been doing. And guys, I'm just going to wrap this up, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. And you guys are fabulous. I think both of you have touched my life, given me this information, allowing me to continue growing as a builder, as a person. And I hope to continue to apply this in my business and in my family's life, to stick around, to live longer, be healthier, and go on more adventures with my family. So, George, do you have anything else you want to wrap it up with?
I just encourage anybody who has seen this now a couple times or listened to it, just begin. Just take whatever the step it is that you need to take. Just start, and don't let the clock hit midnight tonight without doing that. Just start.
And I'd just like to add, go walk your dog.
Yeah, she's out there barking right now. She's barking right now.
I can hear. What do you call her? Patriot?
No, that is definitely not what we're going to call it. By the way, as a massive fan with an autographed picture of Joe Flacco over my family, by the way, I still think Tom Brady is probably the greatest quarterback of all time. So I'm just going to put that out there.
What a great note to end on.
Yeah, right. Hey, guys, thank you so very, very much for your time. You guys are wonderful people and a blessing to me. So I can't wait to meet up with both of you again. And George, feel free to hang out and call me anytime, man.
Okay, I'll do it.
All right.
All right. Guys, thank you for being here.
Good night, everybody.